Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We're kicking off our deep dive today in the science section, looking at an article titled Reimagining India's Tobacco Control Laws. That title itself, Reimagining, suggests, well, that things aren't quite working as intended.
That's right, and the scale of the problem is just immense. The piece highlights the economic costs, a staggering 1.77 lakh crore annually just from tobacco use in people aged 35 and up.
Wow, 1.77 lakh crore, and that's not even the whole picture, is it?
No, add to that another 56,670 crore estimated for the costs related to secondhand smoking. So you're looking at a massive economic burden, not just, a health issue.
It's a huge drain. So we have laws, right, like COTPA 2003. Why the need for reimagining? What are the gaps?
Well, a major gap highlighted is the lack of focus on smokeless tobacco, or SLT. It's incredibly common in India.
Right, things like chewing tobacco, gupka.
Exactly. It's often cheaper, sometimes seen as more culturally okay, less stigma attached compared to smoking. But here's the kicker. The article points out it's known to be more carcinogenic than many smoked forms.
More carcinogenic. Okay, that's a crucial point. So the law's there, but maybe not targeting the right areas effectively, especially SLT.
Precisely. And then there's the issue of companies finding ways around the regulations.
Ah, like the surrogate ads, using similar branding for, say, mouth fresheners.
Exactly that. Or pushing tobacco use indirectly through movies, social media, those OTT platforms everyone's watching. It subtly normalizes it.
And this ties into another point raised, the fiscal measures, the taxes.
Yes, the taxation is described as, well, inadequate and uneven. Take beet is hugely popular, but the tax burden is only around 22%. Cigarettes are higher, about 50%, but still way below the WHO recommendation.
Which is?
WHO suggests a 75% tax burden on the retail price. We're nowhere near that for most products.
Yeah.
And since GST came in back in 2017, there have only been a couple of really minor tax hikes.
So with incomes rising, tobacco products are actually becoming more affordable.
Effectively, yes.
Yeah.
Which, completely undermines the public health goal of reducing consumption.
It seems counterintuitive. What about warning signs? India mandates these huge 85% warnings on packs. Are they working?
Well, that's another issue flagged. The impact of these warnings is apparently rarely evaluated. We don't really know how effective they are. Plus, they tend to focus heavily on fear, like graphic images of oral cancer.
As opposed to?
Other countries might cover a broader range of consequences, like effects on fertility, pregnancy, or even, financial costs. And the idea of plain packaging, which removes branding appeal, isn't really on the table yet in the same way.
Okay. And e-cigarettes, they're banned, right?
Officially banned, yes. But the implementation is described as poor. You can still easily buy them online, which is a huge concern, especially with young people picking them up.
So it sounds like a multi-layered problem. The article mentions the National Tobacco Control Program, too.
Right. It suggests the NTCP lacks a really comprehensive strategy. It focuses on sort of biomedical approaches and awareness, but maybe doesn't dig deep enough into these social determinants, poverty, stress, unemployment, things that often drive people to use tobacco in the first place.
Even school programs like TOEFL are mentioned as maybe not being as effective as they could be compared to, say, CDC guidelines in the U.S.
Yeah, the comparison suggests a need for a more robust, multi-pronged approach in schools, too.
So this whole idea of a tobacco endgame in India, it seems like we're quite far off if these systemic issues aren't tackled.
It certainly looks that way. And there's this interesting point about data. The industry has its sales figures in real time, but public health researchers often struggle with getting up-to-date data on actual consumption patterns.
Which makes planning effective strategies much harder, I imagine.
Definitely. So for you, our listener, even if you don't use tobacco yourself, you can see how these gaps affect public health overall and the economy. It really does call for that reimagining the title talks about.
Okay, let's shift gears from a public health challenge to potentially a really innovative solution. Our next segment is on wastewater surveillance, described as India's new early warning system.
Yes, this is fascinating. The ICMR is planning a major expansion, monitoring 10 different viruses across 50 cities soon. Currently, they're tracking COVID-19 and polio.
And they're adding more, like what?
Things that cause common issues, fever, diarrhea, acute encephalitis syndrome, even respiratory distress pathogens. It's quite a broad scope.
So why wastewater? What makes this such a powerful tool?
Its real strength is as a predictive tool. It gives you community-level data almost in real time, often before people even start showing symptoms and going to clinics.
How does that work, capturing it from people who aren't sick yet?
Exactly. It picks up signals from asymptomatic cases, people infected but without symptoms, and pre-symptomatic cases, people who are infected but haven't developed symptoms yet.
Yeah.
This gives a much earlier warning of what's spreading.
That's incredibly valuable. And it's cost-effective, too, I read.
Highly cost-effective, yes. And non-invasive, you're not testing individuals one by one. It helps pinpoint hotspots where transmission might be high, allowing health authorities to act faster and target resources better.
So just briefly, how is it actually done? Collecting sewage samples?
Pretty much. People shed bits of virus or bacteria genetic fragments when they use the toilet. These travel through the sewage system. Samples are taken from the wastewater, usually before it reaches the treatment plant, and then analyzed in labs.
And the turnaround is quick.
Remarkably quick.
Ugh.
The information can be available in just 5 to 7 days. That's fast enough for a rapid public health response.
That's amazing. And the article mentions uses beyond just tracking diseases.
Absolutely. Wastewater surveillance can also help monitor things like land-based pollution levels, which is crucial for protecting ecosystems, freshwater sources, and even marine environments. UNEP and WHO are really pushing for building capacity in this area globally.
So it's a tool for both public health and environmental health.
Precisely. It's a really encouraging development, especially as we face more emerging pathogens in the future.
It really is a proactive, almost invisible shield for communities. For you listening, think about that. A system protecting your area without you even necessarily knowing it's happening. Pretty impressive public health innovation. Now, from hidden viruses to hidden distortions on our maps, this next one is really interesting. Mapping Africa, correcting distorted perceptions. There's a campaign backed by the African Union to move away from the standard Mercator map projection.
Yes, the one most of us see everywhere. The core issue is that the Mercator projection dramatically distorts the size of land masses.
How so? I know it was designed for navigation.
Exactly. Gerardus Mercator created it back in 1569. It's brilliant for sailing because lines of constant compass bearing rum lines appear as straight lines on the map. But to achieve that flat representation of a sphere, he had to stretch things out, especially near the poles.
Okay, so stretching near the poles means
Places like Greenland, Europe, North America look much bigger than they actually are relative to land masses near the equator, like Africa or South America, which appear shrunk.
can you give an example?
Sure. Africa is enormous, about 30 million square kilometers. But on a Mercator map, it often looks roughly the same size as Greenland. Greenland is actually 14 times smaller than Africa.
14 times. Wow. And Europe compared to Africa.
Europe's looks quite large, maybe comparable in size to Africa on some Mercator maps, but in reality, Africa is more than 3 times larger than Europe.
So this isn't just a technical mapping issue. The article suggests these distortions affect our perception, right?
Absolutely. It subtly conditions us to see Africa as smaller, perhaps less significant, less powerful. The source calls it a potential political tool, maybe unintentionally, that helped during colonial times by making Africa look less vast and could contribute to it seeming less relevant today.
That's a powerful thought. So what's the alternative? Is there a perfect map?
Well, no flat map of a sphere can be perfect. There's always some distortion. You have to choose what to preserve. Mercator preserves local shapes well, which is called being conformal, but sacrifices accurate area.
In the alternatives, the article mentions equal Earth.
Right. The Equal Earth projection, created fairly recently in 2018, does the opposite. It preserves the relative area of land masses. So Africa looks appropriately huge compared to Europe or Greenland. The trade-off is that the shapes aren't perfectly preserved. Continents might look a bit stretched or curved.
Are there others? Goldpeters.
Yes, the Goldpeters projection also preserves area, but tends to stretch shapes vertically, which some people find visually jarring. Equal Earth is seen by many as a good compromise, maintaining relative size while keeping shapes reasonably familiar.
And institutions are starting to adopt these alternatives.
Slowly, yes. The World Bank is moving away from Mercator. National Geographic uses Equal Earth, NASA uses it too. Google Maps now offers a 3D globe view, which avoids projection issues altogether, though their default flat map is still Mercator-based.
So what's stopping a faster shift? It seems logical to use a more accurate map.
It's largely inertia. The Mercator projection is just so deeply ingrained in textbooks, atlases, online, in our minds. Changing that requires revising educational materials worldwide, updating digital platforms, and just overcoming the habit of using what's familiar.
It's a big task. For you, our listener, try picturing that a map where Africa dominates visually because of its true size. How might that shift your own mental map of the world? It definitely makes you think about how representation matters. Okay, let's bring our focus back home to India and talk about GST reforms. The headline is GST Reform, Simplifying Rates, Benefiting Consumers. Sound like big changes are being discussed.
Yes, quite significant. The group of ministers, that GM looking into rate rationalization, has apparently accepted some key proposals. These are set to be discussed in the next GST Council meeting in September.
And they're framing it as a potential Deepa Valley gift. That suggests consumer benefits.
That seems to be the main aim, yes. To simplify the current structure, which has at least 7 different rates, if you count all the slabs and special rates, the plan is to bring it down to essentially 4 main rates.
4 rates? What are they proposing?
A very low rate, possibly under 1%, mainly for things like diamonds and jewelry. Then a 5% slab, an 18% slab, and a higher rate, maybe around 40%, likely for sin goods.
Sin goods like tobacco, online gaming.
Exactly. But the really big shift is consolidating the middle slabs. The proposal suggests moving 99% of items currently in a 12% slab down to 5%.
99%. Okay, that's huge. And the top slab.
And moving 90% of items currently in the highest 28% slab, excluding the sin goods, down to 18%.
Right. So this is where the real benefit comes in for everyday people, for you listening. What kind of items are we talking about?
Well, think about common household goods. Things like soap, toothpaste, basic toiletries. Many are currently at 18%. Under this plan, they drop to 5%.
That's a significant drop. What about bigger ticket items? Cars, ACs?
Non-luxury cars, air conditioners, refrigerators. Many of those are currently in the 28% slab, sometimes with an additional cess. The expectation is they would move down to 18%. That could make a noticeable difference in price.
Definitely. The article estimates the average effective GST rate could fall quite a bit.
Yes, one estimate suggests it could drop from around 14.4% when GST started in 2017, down to maybe 9.5% by 2026-27 if these changes go through.
Okay, that sounds great for consumers, but what about government revenues? This must mean a potential hit to tax collection.
Absolutely. Estimates range from a potential revenue impact of 1.1 lakh crore up to maybe 1.8 lakh crore, which would be shared between the center and the states.
Can the governments afford that?
The thinking seems to be that the union government, especially after that record dividend from the RBI, can likely absorb its share. The states, however, are understandably more concerned.
Concerns about losses.
Yes, some states are already suggesting that if they do lose revenue because of this rationalization, there needs to be a clear compensation mechanism put in place.
That makes sense. But the main thrust is simplification.
Definitely. The goal is to have the vast majority of goods and services fall into just 2 main rates, 5% and 18%. That would make the system much simpler to navigate for businesses and potentially cheaper for consumers.
So for you, our listener, this is one to watch. Think about your regular shopping list. How might fewer, lower tax rates impact your household budget? It would be quite tangible. All right, shifting to our profile section now. First up, we're looking at Wang, China's foreign minister, often dubbed the diplomatic silver fox. He's described as incredibly influential, the unassailable czar of Xi Jinping's foreign policy.
Yes, his influence stems significantly from his position in the Politburo, China's top decision-making body. He holds seniority there, which gives him considerable weight.
The profile mentions his early visit to India in 2014, right after PM Modi took office. That seemed quite significant at the time.
It was. He came as President Xi's special envoy just days after the new government was sworn in. There was a lot of diplomatic chatter around that visit, suggestions that it might have led to the cancellation of a planned India-US-Japan meeting and a postponement of Modi's Japan trip, perhaps to manage the optics before Xi's own visit to India later that year.
Interesting. And his career path has been quite remarkable. He was elevated to the Politburo even after the usual retirement age.
That's right. Getting into the 24-member Politburo in 2022, when he was already past the informal retirement age of 68, was a clear sign of his standing. He also heads the party's Central Commission for Foreign Affairs Office, a very powerful position.
And his diplomatic style. The article mentions an evolution from the wolf warrior approach.
Yes, there's a sense that he helped pivot China's diplomacy. The wolf warrior style, that very assertive, sometimes abrasive public diplomacy, became prominent in the 2010s. But after China's global image took a hit, especially post-COVID, Wang Yi is seen as having helped recalibrate towards a more polished, perhaps more traditionally diplomatic approach, although still very firm on China's core interests.
What about his background? He experienced the Cultural Revolution.
Yes, like many leaders of his generation, he was part of the Xiaxiang movement, sent down to work in the countryside Heilongjiang province, in his case. Later, he studied Japanese, which was quite unusual then, and built a long career in the foreign ministry, including serving as ambassador to Japan.
That experience must have shaped his approach. How is he seen in negotiations? The profile mentions his interactions with India.
Indian officials describe him as a very tenacious negotiator. The article cites the example of the lead-up to PM Vajpayee's 2003 visit to Beijing. Officials involved recall Wang Yi, then vice foreign minister, driving a hard bargain, particularly on India's wording regarding Tibet.
And the One China policy.
He's consistently pushed for India to reaffirm its One China policy. But India stopped explicitly mentioning it in joint statements after 2010, largely in response to China issuing stapled visas to Indians from certain regions. There was that famous exchange where Sushma Swaraj apparently retorted, "If China affirms its One India policy, we will consider it."
He's certainly been active globally, brokering talks between Iran and Saudi Arabia, for instance.
Yes, that was a major diplomatic coup in 2023. He's been involved in numerous initiatives, U.S.-China talks, U.S.-North Korea trying to mediate between Russia and Ukraine, even regional groupings in South Asia.
Ah, yes, the SAARC minus India concern.
India has expressed some unease about certain groupings he's convened, involving other South Asian nations but not India, seeing them potentially as efforts to create alternative regional frameworks.
So his vision is for China to be a major mediator, but perhaps on its own terms. The article mentions the win-win perception.
He talks about transcending a you-lose-I-win mentality. But some diplomats who've negotiated with him apparently feel his definition of win-win often translates to China winning twice. It reflects the complexity of engaging with China's diplomacy under his stewardship.
A fascinating figure. For you listening, it's a reminder of how individual diplomats and their long careers can really shape international dynamics. Staying in the profile section, let's talk about Jerome Powell, the chairman of the U.S. Federal Reserve. The key theme here is his defense of the Fed's independence, especially against some really extraordinary public attacks.
Absolutely extraordinary. The profile highlights how President Donald Trump, who actually nominated Powell for the chair position, repeatedly and publicly attacked him, calling him a knucklehead, even an enemy worse than G.
That's almost unheard of, isn't it? A president attacking their own Fed chair so directly.
It really is. The source describes it as the most direct assault on the Fed's independence since the Treasury-Fed Accord way back in 1951, which formally established that independence.
And Powell's background is interesting, too. A Republican appointed initially by a Democrat.
That's right. He was first appointed to the Fed's Board of Governors by President Obama in 2012. Trump then elevated him to chair in 2018. It underscores how the Fed chair role has traditionally been seen as somewhat nonpartisan, focused on economic stability above politics. Trump's attacks really shattered that convention.
So what did Powell do policy-wise that drew Trump's anger?
It started pretty early in Powell's term in 2018. He continued the policy of gradual interest rate hikes that his predecessor, Janet Yellen, had begun, aiming to normalize policy after years of low rates.
And Trump didn't like that.
Not at all. He publicly criticized the rate hikes, saying he wasn't thrilled, breaking that tradition of presidents not commenting on Fed policy. The criticism grew, with Trump even suggesting Powell should be fired.
How did Powell react?
He remained very calm, very measured publicly. Later in 2019, facing uncertainty from the U.S.-China trade war, Powell actually pivoted and started cutting rates. These insurance cuts helped boost the markets. But when asked about the pressure to resign, he simply cited the law.
What did he say?
He basically said, "The law is clear that I have a 4-year term, and I fully intend to serve it." A very firm but understated defense of his position and the Fed's independence.
Quite a moment. Then came the pandemic. What were his key actions then?
The Fed's response was massive, unprecedented, really. They cut interest rates effectively to zero in March 2020. They also massively expanded their balance sheet, essentially printing money, buying up assets to keep credit flowing. We're talking trillions of dollars.
Pumping huge amounts of money into the system.
Exactly. Their balance sheet ballooned from about $4.7 trillion to over $7 trillion in just a couple of months.
But then came inflation. He initially called it transitory, right?
He did. And that was a significant miscalculation, which he later acknowledged. As inflation proved persistent and surged, he led the Fed in another major pivot, starting aggressively raising interest rates from March 2022, taking them all the way up to 5.5% by July 2023 to fight that inflation.
So, a career marked by these huge swings and intense pressure, the standing ovation at Jackson Hole wasn't just about policy then.
No, the profile suggests it was primarily recognition for his steadfast defense of the Fed's independence through all that political turbulence. That was seen as crucial.
And now he's hinting at rate cuts starting soon.
Yes, he indicated a rate cut cycle is likely to begin in September, which, as the article rightly notes, would probably be music for Mr. Trump's ears should he return to office.
Indeed. For you, our listener, Powell's story is a real case study in the pressures facing central bankers and why that institutional independence is considered so vital, especially in turbulent times. Okay, let's move to our magazine section for our last two pieces. First, a truly heartwarming story from Kerala. Kerala's Young embraced palliative care. It talks about this amazing culture of young people, even students, volunteering to care for the elderly and terminally ill.
It's really quite remarkable. The article gives examples like Adhil Shah, a 20-year-old engineering student helping with practical tasks like mopping floors and delivering medicines for patients, or Nehala Kithun, 25, who's been involved since she was 18, assisting with patient care.
And this isn't just a few isolated cases.
Not at all. It's described as a unique, community-driven phenomenon that's been growing for over 15 years. Kerala now has government recognition for this, with over 1,400 palliative care units and around 8,000 registered volunteers, many of them young.
Wow, 8,000 volunteers. And palliative care in Kerala isn't just end-of-life care?
No, that's a key point. It extends beyond terminal illness to cover people with serious chronic conditions: cancer, stroke, kidney disease, even mental illness. It aims for comprehensive support: medical, nursing, and really importantly, psychosocial support.
That's a very broad definition. So how did this start? Especially considering India's huge need for palliative care, 5.4 million people annually, and Kerala's own aging population.
It traces back to a pain relief clinic started in 1993. But it really took off through a community-based model, the neighborhood network in palliative care, integrating care into local communities. A crucial factor was Kerala's 2008 palliative care policy, which mandated these setups.
And framing it as a social issue.
Exactly. It was seen as a social concern with medical needs, not just a purely medical problem. This led to widespread awareness, even starting in high schools through groups like Students in Palliative Care, SIPC, NSS, and NCC units. Early exposure and structured training seemed key.
The personal stories are so moving, like Fatima writing letters for patients or Nihala helping a young cancer patient experience being a bride in a dance.
Or just the simple act Nihala mentioned of cutting a paraplegic woman's toenails. Basic human care that means so much. These acts build deep connections.
What's the impact, both ways, for patients and the young volunteers?
For patients, especially the elderly who might be living alone due to migration patterns in Kerala, the energy and company of young people combats loneliness and isolation. For the volunteers, it's incredibly formative. It teaches empathy, emotional intelligence, dealing with difficult situations.
And can even shape careers, like Iona Kunju becoming a social worker.
Yes, but the article also mentions challenges the emotional burden, the risk of hyper-volunteering, where enthusiasm might blur boundaries. So proper training, support, and structure are vital.
It feels like such an important counter-narrative in today's world.
It really does. A gentle yet constant pushback, as the article puts it, against neglecting the vulnerable. It fosters a politics of love and care. The story of Ashlarani, whose identity was restored beyond just her medical condition through palliative care, is incredibly powerful.
It truly is. For you listening, it makes you reflect on the power of simple human connection and community action in bringing dignity and meaning, both to those receiving care and those giving it. For our final piece today, we journey to Southeast Asia, to the Preah Vihear temple in Cambodia. The article title says it all: War, Worship, and Tamil Heritage. This 11th century Shiva temple is a UNESCO site, but it's also been at the heart of a long-standing conflict between Thailand and Cambodia.
Yes, its location is stunning, but also politically charged, perched high on a cliff in the Dangrek Mountains, right on the border. The temple itself is magnificent, dedicated primarily to Shiva.
But the really fascinating angle here is its connection to Tamil India. That seems less known.
Much less known, but quite deep. The temple was built over centuries, mainly by Khmer kings, Suryavarman I and Suryavarman II the latter, also built Angkor Wat. But crucial inscriptions, dating back to around 1020 CE, reveal an alliance.
An alliance between the Khmer king and
Between Suryavarman III and the great Chola king, Rajendra Chola I. Suryavarman apparently sought Rajendra Chola's help against regional rivals. This led to Rajendra Chola's famous naval campaign in Southeast Asia around 1025 CE.
The one that earned him the title Kadaram Kondan.
Exactly, conqueror of Kadaram, thought to be Kedah in modern Malaysia. So there was a significant political and military connection established back then.
And this translated into shared art and religion at Preah Vihear.
Yes, the iconographic links are striking. Take the image of Nataraja, the dancing Shiva, which is so central to Tamil Saivism and Chola art.
How is it depicted at Preah Vihear?
Very specifically, Nataraja is shown dancing, and significantly at his feet is the skeletal figure of Karakalamayar. She's a 6th century Tamil poet saint, one of the early Naimars, who famously wished to witness Shiva's cosmic dance.
And that exact imagery is found in Chola temples.
Yes. Identical depictions are found in the major Chola temples at Thanjavur, built by Rajaraja VI, and Gangaikonda Cholapuram, built by Rajendra I. Seeing this specific complex iconography prominently carved over the entrance to Preah Vihear's main shrine strongly suggests direct cultural transmission.
That's incredible, though Kara kings often blended different faiths, right?
They did. They were known for syncretism, integrating Shaivism, Vaishnavism, Buddhism, and Preah Vihear reflects this too, despite being mainly Shaivite.
So Vaishnava themes are also present.
Yes. For instance, there's a detailed carving of the Parkadal, or the churning of the ocean of milk, a major Vaishnava myth on one of the Gopuram entrances. While less common in India itself, similar depictions are found in Pallava temples in Kanchipuram.
Other examples.
You also find images of Vishnu reclining on the serpent Ananta, Krishna dancing on the serpent Kaliya, and Krishna lifting Mount Govardhana, all motifs familiar from South Indian, particularly Plava, traditions. It points to multiple layers of influence from the Tamil region over time.
These connections are especially resonant now, aren't they, as we mark the 1000th anniversary of Rajendra Chola's coronation and achievements?
Absolutely. It highlights how interconnected these regions were a millennium ago, sharing not just political alliances, but deep artistic and religious ideas. It adds another layer to understanding the temple's rich history, beyond just the modern conflicts surrounding it.
A powerful reminder of ancient links. For you, our listener, think about how these threads of shared culture and history stretched across oceans, leaving legacies we're still uncovering today. It really broadens our perspective on regional histories. Thank you for listening. If today's episode gave you something useful, consider following us on Spotify so you're the first to hear the next one. You can give suggestions by contacting on Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.